So now we're going to be dealing with rounding and decimals. And the way that this works is that you have to figure out where you're rounding to and then figure out what to do with the extra numbers at the end. So if in these problems here I'm rounding to the tenths place, the tenths place in each of these is going to be this one here, this one here, this one here, and this one here. That's the tenth place. And all I have to do is I have to decide, is that number going to stay the same or go up by 1? So let me show you what I mean by that. In this one here, we're going to start off with by rewriting it out. It's 3 point something. And now I just have to decide, does that 4 change to a 5 or stay as a 4? And the way I figure that out is I look at the next number over. Is 2 closer to 1 or closer to 0? Is 2 closer to 10 or closer to 0? If it's closer to 10, then I go ahead and I move it up. I move up the number, so it would then be 3.5. But it's actually closer to 0, so it's going to stay as 3.4. And then it doesn't matter what the rest of the places are because I've rounded to the tenths place. For this one here, this next one here, I'm going to do the same thing. It's 3 point something. Now I just have to decide, does that 6 change to a 7 or does it stay as a 6? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this number here. Is 8 closer to 10 or closer to 0? It's closer to 10. So that means I'm going to round up to 3.7. So if this, for this next problem here, this one here, it's 3 point, and I have to decide, does it go for a 7 or go to an 8? And this one here is a rule that you just need to remember. If it's 5 or greater, you round up the digit, one more digit. So in this case here, it's going to be 3.8 because 5 is the next column over, and because we round up instead of rounding down. So 3.8 is going to be the new number instead of being 3.75. And it wouldn't be 3.7 because even though 5 is halfway between those two numbers, the rule is you always go higher instead of lower. And for this one here, same sort of idea here. It's going to be 3 point something. I don't know if it's 3.5 or 3.6. So I look at the next number over. Is that number closer to 0 or 10? It's closer to 10. So I'm going to change that number to 3.6. So now we're going to try the same thing, but instead we're going to round to the hundredths place. So this is the place we're going to round to. And we just have to decide in each of these, does it go up by 1 or does it stay the same? And then we get rid of the rest of the numbers. So in this case here, 5.68, we now look at this next number over. Is it going to be 5.69 or 5.68? 9 is closer to 10 than it is to 0, so it's going to go up 1. So it's going to be 5.69. For this one here, I can start by writing out 5.2, and now I just have to decide, does the 7 change to an 8 or does it stay as a 7? So I look at that 3, and that 3 is closer to 0 than it is to 10. So it stays the same, exactly like that. For this one here, it's going to be 8.5, and now I just have to look beyond there and say this next number is either going to be a 5 or a 6. So I look at this next one here, and remember the rule before, if it's 5 or greater, you round up. So this is going to be 8.56. And that's just the end of it. You rounded it now to 2 decimal places. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. For this next one here, it's going to be 6.9, and then I just have to decide, is that an 8 or a 9 that's next? And the way I do that is by looking at the next digit over. And so it's actually a 1, so that's closer to 0 than it is to 10. So it's going to say 6.98. And that's how it's going to end up. That's rounding like that. Now there are a couple of special cases here. If I was to round this first number to the tenths column here, the thing I do is, again, I go ahead and I rewrite it out, 6 point. I'm trying to figure out, is that a 9 or a 0 that's next? Because one more than 9 is going to be 10. Or is it a 9 or a 10 that I change this number to here? So I'm going to look at this example, this next one here, and it's a 9, so I have to round up. So it's sort of like I'm going to go ahead and change that 9, this 9 here, to a 10. But I can't do that and keep the 6 being the same. So I actually have to round it up to a 7, and then it's going to be a 7.0. Is that number rounded to the tenths place? It is important to keep that 0 because that indicates that you have rounded to the tenths place, as opposed to just writing 7. If I ask to round this one here to the hundredths place, same sort of idea here. It's going to be 5.8, and now I'm going to look at that 9. Is this number here going to move it up to a 10, or is it going to keep it as a 9? And since it's a 5 or greater, it's going to round up, so that means this number here is no longer a 9, it's going to change to a 10, and I can't really write it that way. I can't fit 10 as a single digit, so I have to add one more on to the 8, and then it's going to 5.90 is actually how that's going to work, because I'm rounding up by 1/100th, and when I do that, it's going to end up with 5.90.